The library in the Snowglobe asterisk. It had been snowing for days in the quiet town of Bell Hollow. The rooftops wore thick white hats. The streets were muffled in silence, and smoke curled gently from chimneys like sleepy whispers into the sky. In a little brick house at the end of Wren Street, a girl named Elsie tiptoed up the attic stairs with a flashlight in hand and curiosity blooming in her chest. She had always been a curious child, not in the noisy way, but in the quiet kind that listened to old clocks ticking and wondered what they dreamed of. She liked rainy days, lost buttons, and the smell of old books. And this snowy afternoon, while the wind whistled lullabies against the window panes, Elsie decided to explore her grandmother's attic. Only look, her grandmother had warned with a smile, not touch. But Elsie had fingers like questions, gentle but persistent, and eyes that saw magic in forgotten corners. The attic was filled with slanted beams, spider webs like lace, and the sleepy sigh of time. There were trunks that smelled of mothballs, lamps that hadn't glowed in years, and boxes filled with photographs of people who looked like strangers but smiled like family. She was about to turn back when something caught her eye, a soft glimmer from beneath a faded quilt. The flashlight beam wavered over a wooden box, no bigger than a loaf of bread. It was locked with a little brass latch and decorated with carvings of tiny stars and swirling snowflakes. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a snow globe. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. The globe was larger than her hand and cool to the touch. Inside it, beneath a glassy dome, stood a library. Not just any library, but one that seemed alive. The walls were lined with minuscule bookshelves. Tiny ladders leaned against them, and walking slowly along the aisles, no bigger than pins, were what looked like snowfolk. Small, robed figures with floating candles in their palms and hoods drawn low. Elsie blinked. Had they moved? She shook the globe gently. The snow inside swirled like stardust. One of the tiny figures looked up, straight at her. Elsie gasped and nearly dropped it. Then, something even stranger happened. A soft chime echoed through the attic. Not from a clock, not from a phone, but from the globe itself. The glass shimmered faintly, and her fingertips tingled as if the snow inside had reached out and touched her. Then, crack, a thin fissure of light spread across the globe's surface. But instead of breaking, the light spread outward, into the attic, into Elsie. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she was standing in snow. The air was cold and glittering. She stood at the edge of a forest. Tall trees covered in crystal frost, their branches silent and unmoving. In front of her was a winding path of soft blue snow. And far ahead, flickering warmly through the trees, was the unmistakable glow of candlelight, the library from the globe. Elsie turned in a circle. Behind her, there was no house, no attic, no sign of her grandmother's world. Only silence, snowfall, and the sense that this place had been waiting for her a very long time. She took a step. The snow didn't crunch. It sang. Soft notes, like a lullaby made of wind and memory, followed her footsteps. Trees bowed slightly as she passed, not in greeting, but as if acknowledging something sacred, as if she were part of a story just beginning to unfold. As she neared the light, the path led her to a wide clearing. There, nestled in a dip of snow, stood the library from the globe. Only now, it was full-sized and glowing like a lantern in the winter dark. It was made of stone and wood, with snowy ivy climbing its walls and stained glass windows depicting constellations and books. The door was enormous and carved with golden words in a language she didn't recognize, except she could somehow read it. To those who believe in stories, this door shall always open. Elsie stepped closer. The door opened before she touched it. Inside was wonder. The warmth of the library wrapped around her like a blanket. The scent of paper, pinewood, and cinnamon hung in the air. Rows and rows of books stretched up into the shadows. Some shelves so high They disappeared into the vaulted ceiling. Floating lanterns bobbed lazily, casting soft golden light. Snow-dusted footprints, not hers, marked the wooden floor. At the far end of the grand hall stood a desk carved from dark oak. Behind it sat a figure with a long white beard, glasses perched on the edge of his nose, and a robe that shimmered like fresh snow. He looked up and smiled without surprise. "Elsie," he said warmly, "we've been waiting. You know my name." "Of course." The Snowglobe chooses carefully. "Chooses for what?" she asked. "To be its keeper." Elsie stepped closer, heart thumping. "But I don't know anything about magic, or books, or keeping anything." He chuckled softly. "You know how to wonder. That's enough to begin." A book floated toward her. It was small, bound in soft silver cloth, and bore no title, only a single embossed snowflake. "This is yours now," the man said. "You may write in it, or let it write you." "What does that mean?" He smiled again, but didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the aisles. "Every book in this library holds a story someone forgot. They come here to rest, but some still long to be remembered. That's where you come in." Elsie's eyes widened. "I'm supposed to read them. Read. Listen. Remember. Dream." His eyes twinkled. "But first, meet the books." As she stepped into the nearest aisle, the books began to stir. Yes, stir. Some stretched like cats waking from naps. Others fluttered their pages like wings. A few whispered her name. One sneezed. "Bless you," Elsie said, startled. "Thank you," said the book in a dusty voice. "It's drafty on the top shelf." She laughed, a clear, bell-like sound that echoed through the library. The books chuckled back. Somewhere, a quill twirled in the air and scribbled in a ledger. Elsie spent hours wandering. Some books opened by themselves. Some asked riddles. One told a joke so silly, she snorted cocoa out her nose. Even though she hadn't drunk any, she felt safe, like she belonged. Eventually, the robed man reappeared. "The snow will call you back soon. But don't worry, you can return." Elsie clutched the silver book. "How?" "By believing." She woke up in the attic, curled beneath the old quilt, the snow globe warm in her hands. It didn't glow. It didn't whisper. It simply sat there, ordinary as ever. But on the floor beside her lay a silver book with a snowflake on its cover. And inside it, on the first page, in her own handwriting, Chapter 1, the day the book sneezed. Elsie smiled. Tomorrow, she'd go back. The moment Elsie stepped past the glass threshold, the world outside vanished in a swirl of frost. What had been the cozy flicker of her grandparents' fireplace now became an echo in her memory, hushed beneath the weight of silent snowfall and curious light. The air was cool, but not biting, scented with old paper, pine needles, and something sweet like cinnamon steeped in vanilla. The snow globe had opened, and within it, a world had been waiting. Elsie stood at the base of a spiraling marble staircase that led into the heart of an impossible building, a library forged from ice and moonlight. Its spires rose like frozen music, crystalline towers humming softly as if the wind were singing through their edges. Each tower shimmered with embedded runes that pulsed faintly, like sleepy hearts. The sky above her was twilight, soft, ever-dim violet that didn't quite fade into night, nor rise into dawn. "You're late," said a small voice behind her. Elsie spun. A creature about the height of a rabbit stood with arms crossed. It wore a mossy green waistcoat, round spectacles, and a gold pocket watch chained to its fur. It wasn't a rabbit, though. Its ears were too pointed, its eyes too wise. It looked like a cross between a fox, a hare, and something older than time. "You were supposed to arrive last Tuesday." Honestly, young humans and their sense of punctuality, the creature muttered. "Excuse me? What are you?" Elsie managed, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "Name's Thimblewick. I'm the caretaker of this wing, the Library of Forgotten Wonder." He gestured upward, and as he did, a thin sheet of aurora light rippled across the ceiling. "Come on then. Time doesn't wait for anyone, especially not in here. Thimblewick scampered forward with a curious bounce in his step, and Elsie, driven by both awe and instinct, followed Dot as they ascended the staircase. Elsie realized that each step shimmered slightly differently beneath her feet, as though she were treading on echoes of dreams. The higher they climbed, the more the library revealed itself. Rows upon rows of floating bookshelves hovered in midair, gently rotating like planets in orbit. Some books had wings and fluttered lazily from shelf to shelf. Others muttered to themselves or glowed with strange glyphs along their spines. "This place is alive," she whispered. "Of course it is," Thimblewick said, adjusting his spectacles. "Books are memories, thoughts, promises. This library exists because they do." He paused at a platform shaped like a snowflake, its edges spinning gently. This way. They crossed a narrow bridge made of starlight and landed upon a wider hall. The walls here were covered in framed moments, moving images like paintings that whispered secrets to one another. Elsie passed a portrait of a girl with antlers reading by candlelight, a storm held captive in a bell jar, and a violin playing itself beneath a weeping willow. Thimblewick stopped before a round door. "Here we are, your reading chamber." The door creaked open, revealing a cozy alcove filled with cushions, lanterns, and a hearth of glowing coals. At the center rested a pedestal, upon which floated a single book, bound in midnight blue velvet. Elsie approached it reverently. "Is this for me?" "A story begins when a reader opens the page," Thimblewick said solemnly. "But remember, this library is made of tales that were lost, abandoned, or never told. Reading them breathes them back into the world. Choose wisely." With trembling fingers, Elsie touched the book. A rush of wind filled the chamber, and the flames in the hearth leapt high. The room dissolved. Elsie found herself in a forest of glass trees. Their trunks were transparent and veined with golden sap that pulsed like veins. Snow fell upward. The ground beneath her feet was soft with moss that glowed a gentle sea green. All around her, whispers floated on the air, like wind passing through wind chimes. She turned to find that she was not alone. A girl, no older than herself, stood barefoot among the trees. Her hair was silver white, and her eyes the color of morning frost. She wore a gown made from stars. "You open the book," the girl said, as if greeting an old friend. "Then the story can be told." Elsie stepped forward. "Who are you?" "I am the memory of a story that was never finished," the girl said with a smile both sad and kind. "And you're the one who might give it an ending." Suddenly, Elsie understood. The books in the library of forgotten wonder weren't just meant to be read. They were meant to be completed. The girl led her deeper into the forest. As they walked, Elsie saw fragments of stories hanging from branches like fruit, a golden slipper, a broken compass, a map that redrew itself with each blink. The trees whispered of adventures half-lived and heroes forgotten. Why were these stories never finished? Elsie asked. "Because someone stopped believing," the girl said softly. "Or because the world forgot them." Sometimes a story ends not with a conclusion, but with silence. Elsie paused. "Can I really finish a story? What if I get it wrong?" The girl smiled. "There is no wrong ending, only the one you choose to give." They arrived at a clearing where a lantern hung from a tree branch, casting a glow like moonlight dipped in honey. "This is where your part begins," said the girl. Elsie looked down. A quill rested in her hand, though she hadn't noticed picking it up. And before her, floating in the air, was the first blank page. The snowfall had quieted into a gentle hush, like a lullaby whispered by the wind. Nora's boots left soft impressions as she crossed the marble threshold of the library's central rotunda, its dome ceiling painted with a frozen sky dotted by shimmering constellations. Around her, thousands of books floated mid-air in graceful, lazy spirals, untethered from shelves, dancing like paper snowflakes in some silent celebration of words. She turned in slow awe, her eyes wide as they traced the domed ceiling, the invisible music of the room soaking into her skin. This place was alive, She realized every book seemed to pulse faintly with memory, each spine a heartbeat from another time. A cough echoed behind a pillar. Startled, Nora spun around. From the shadows emerged an old man, wearing a coat stitched with silver threads and fur-lined boots. His face was wrinkled, yes, but not frail. His eyes glimmered beneath a pair of round spectacles, and they twinkled with something that made Nora pause. Recognition. "You must be the one the Snowglobe chose," the man said, voice like thick parchment. "I guess," Nora replied. "Are you the librarian?" He smiled. "A librarian, yes. But more importantly, I am the keeper of forgotten stories." "The what?" "The stories people forget before they even finish reading. The ones children dream of, but never write down. The half-told tales that fall between the cracks of memory. This library shelters them." He gestured at the floating books. "Each of these was once almost lost, and now they rest here until someone remembers them again." Nora blinked. "That's so sad and beautiful." The keeper chuckled. "You'd be surprised how often beauty and sadness dance together." She watched him walk toward a floating book that hovered nearby, its pages glowing softly, as if lit by an internal candle. The keeper reached out, and the book nestled gently into his hands. He opened it with reverence. "This one," he said, "was about a fox who guided children through dreams. It was nearly lost when its writer grew up and forgot about dreams altogether. But look, now that you're here, it flickers again." As Nora peered over his shoulder, she saw delicate illustrations of starlit forests and a glowing lantern. Her chest tightened. "That looks like the fox I saw in the forest." The keeper's eyes twinkled. "Of course, some stories find a way to echo across worlds." He closed the book and tucked it beneath his arm. "Come, there's more you must see." They wandered deeper into the library, through corridors where walls shimmered like frozen waterfalls, reflecting shifting memories in the surface of the ice. In one corner, Nora glimpsed a boy flying on a floating violin. In another, a girl talking to a mountain. "These," the keeper said, "are the echo chambers. Here, stories murmur what remains of them, whispering pieces to anyone who dares to listen." Nora pressed her hand to one icy wall. A whisper threaded into her mind. She left the window open, and the stars crawled in. She gasped. "Did I just hear that?" He nodded. "Some stories speak directly, but they only reveal themselves to those who believe." She trailed her fingers along the surface, letting more fragments trickle in, tiny slivers of tales that never fully bloomed. A sense of gentle sorrow curled in her stomach. Why does no one come here? Because the Snowglobe finds only those who need it, and most people forget to need stories. Nora frowned. "That's terrible." The keeper stopped before a massive pair of doors. They pulsed faintly, like a giant's sleeping breath. "This," he whispered, "is the Hall of Unwritten Endings?" He pressed his palm to the door, and it creaked open, revealing a cavernous hall where shelves stretched endlessly. But these were different. Each shelf held not books, but flickering vials of light, like captured fireflies. Nora stepped inside, entranced. What are they? The ends of stories never told. 1,000 versions of what might have been. Some were never finished, others never dared to be begun. He reached for one vial, labeled in looping script. "The time the moon forgot how to shine." He handed it to her. She held it close, and suddenly her mind filled with a bittersweet image. A pale moon wandering the skies, asking stars to borrow light. A girl building a telescope from her grandmother's teacups. A last dance before dawn. Then it faded. She held the vial tighter. "It's so beautiful, but it's just floating here." The keeper sighed. "That is why we need dreamers. To finish what others left behind. To choose which endings deserve to be remembered." He looked at her intently now. "You, Nora, have been called here for a reason. The library is not just a sanctuary. It's a task, a promise." She felt her heart stir. "You want me to finish a story?" "More than one, perhaps. But tonight, only one truly calls you." He gestured toward a small alcove. On a pedestal lay a closed book, its cover blank, its pages glowing faintly through the edges. A title slowly began to appear as she approached. The library in the Snowglobe, her hands trembled. But that's the story. He nodded, and it is not yet done. Nora opened the book. Inside, the first few pages were written, scenes she recognized. Her walk through the snow, the library's rival, her conversation with the keeper. Then, blankness. You see, he whispered, it is yours now. What happens next depends on you. Nora's fingers hovered above the open book. The pages before her shimmered, blank but brimming with the promise of ink. She didn't know what she was supposed to write, or even how to begin. But something in her heart urged her forward, like the gentle pull of the tide on the shore. I don't know how to finish a story, she said softly. The keeper stood beside her, patient as a stone. You don't need to know. You only need to feel it. With trembling hands, Nora touched the first blank page. The moment her skin met the parchment, a flicker of silver light bloomed beneath her fingertips. Words began to appear, not written, but remembered. She stood at the edge of the library, wondering if she was brave enough to chase a forgotten dream. The air around her shifted. The books floating in the rotunda began to circle her like curious birds, rustling softly. The keeper stepped back, his face lit by quiet awe. You've opened the path, he said. The book glowed in her hands. Light spilled from its pages like moonlight leaking from a lantern. One by one, the pages lifted into the air, torn not by force, but by purpose. They fluttered like doves through a tall arched doorway at the far end of the rotunda, a doorway that had not been there before. Nora stared, heart thundering. Where are they going? They're showing you the story, the keeper replied. You must follow, without another word. She stepped through the arch. The world shifted instantly. She found herself in a snow-covered meadow, not unlike the one she had crossed on her way to the Snowglobe. But this place felt different, dreamlike, saturated with color and memory. The sky pulsed with soft indigo light, and the snowflakes fell like glittering stars. Floating before her were the pages, glowing, hovering like fireflies. They began to move, leading her forward. She followed them into a forest of glass trees. Their trunks shimmered with transparency, reflecting 1,000 tiny versions of herself. Each step she took echoed like a memory being replayed. In one reflection, she saw a younger version of herself, curled up in bed, whispering stories into a flashlight. In another, she was in a schoolyard, staring at her notebook, heartbroken as other children laughed at her stories. She stopped. The pain in her chest was unexpected. Why are you showing me this? She whispered. The pages circled her like a soft wind. One settled at her feet. She picked it up. On it were the words, to tell a story, you must first face your own. Tears welled in her eyes. She had forgotten how badly she once wanted to write, to create, to believe. Somewhere along the way, she had let the world convince her that imagination was foolish, that stories didn't matter unless they were perfect. But here, in this dreamlike realm between snowflakes and stars, those beliefs melted like frost in sunlight. She walked on. The forest opened into a clearing where a frozen lake stretched before her. The surface was smooth as glass, reflecting the night sky above. On the far side stood a cottage made entirely of books, its chimney puffing out spirals of parchment instead of smoke. Nora approached, heart pounding. Inside, a fire glowed gently in a fireplace carved from encyclopedias. The walls were lined with handwritten notes and drawings. In the center of the room sat a girl, or perhaps a version of herself. She was younger, with ink-stained fingers and bright eyes. She looked up and smiled. I was waiting for you, the girl said. Nora hesitated. Who are you? I'm the story you abandoned. The girl stood and walked to a desk covered in open journals. You wrote about me once. I lived in a clock tower and kept time for the stars. But you never finished me. You got scared. I didn't know how, Nora said. Her voice cracked. That's okay, The girl replied. You came back. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then the girl reached into a drawer and pulled out a quill. It shimmered like moonlight. You're ready now, she said. Right. Nora sat at the desk. The pages that had led her here now gathered around, gently settling into place before her like a patient audience. She dipped the quill into an invisible inkpot and began to write. The words came slowly at first, uncertain, like a bird testing its wings. But soon, they began to flow. Not perfect, not polished, but true. She wrote about magic that whispered through keyholes, about children who bottled laughter in glass jars, about a girl who stitched torn dreams with silver thread. And most of all, she wrote about the library, the Snowglobe, and the stories that waited to be found. The quill never ran dry. Time melted. When she finally looked up, the girl was gone. The fire had dimmed, and the pages had returned to the book in her hands. She stood, stepping back outside into the snowy clearing. The keeper was waiting there, beneath the stars. You did it, he said gently. Nora nodded. It's not perfect, but it's mine. He smiled. That is more than enough. The book in her hands now bore a title in golden script, The Story Weaver, and beneath it, her name. The stars above Nora's head shimmered like ink drops in deep velvet. The snowy clearing where she stood felt still, reverent, like the final page of a story that didn't want to end. But the book in her hands pulsed with a warm light, whispering that this was not a conclusion. It was an awakening. She had written. She had remembered. She had faced the shadowed places in her own memory, and now she carried a story that was truly hers. The keeper stood at the edge of the clearing, his tall figure outlined by silver moonlight. In his hands, he held an old brass key. This is yours now, he said softly. Nora hesitated. A key to what? He smiled, mysterious as always. To every locked door you feared to open. She stepped forward and took it. The moment the key touched her palm, the world around her rippled, as though reality itself had sighed. Snowflakes danced higher into the sky. The lake behind the book cottage began to swirl, and the trees of glass trembled in anticipation. The story isn't done, the keeper said. But you must take it further now, into the world beyond this place. Nora nodded. She knew. The library was calling her back. She turned, and in a blink, the snowy forest dissolved. She was back in the rotunda, at the heart of the library, inside the Snowglobe. But now, something had changed. The great floating books that once circled endlessly above had begun to descend, like birds coming home to roost. One by one, they opened their pages to her, as if bowing. The golden staircase that once led to nowhere now glowed with soft firelight, spiraling downward into a chamber previously hidden from sight. The key in her hand vibrated. Gently. Nora followed the new staircase, each step lighting up beneath her feet. The air was thick with the scent of old ink, lavender, and dust. Walls of curved bookshelves hugged the spiral tightly, every title whispering as she passed. Finally, she reached a door. It was unlike any she had seen before. It was not made of wood or glass, but of written words, layered upon each other like feathers. A living door of language. Her fingers gripped the key. When she inserted it into the lock, the words parted, rearranging themselves into a sentence. Only the story weaver may pass. The door opened. She entered a chamber the size of a cathedral, domed in crystal, with walls made entirely of transparent pages. Snow swirled on the outside, as if the entire space was suspended within another snow globe. At the center stood a tree, not like the others. This tree was made of paper. Its trunk was thick with scrolls, its branches extended like quills, and its leaves were living pages, constantly writing and rewriting themselves in delicate golden ink. The wind that circled it sounded like 1,000 pens scratching gently at once. Nora stepped forward. She had found it. The heart of the library. In the roots of the tree lay a stone table, and on it, a cradle. Resting inside was a single blank book. Unlike the others, this one bore no title. But Nora knew instinctively it was the book of becoming. Here, writers didn't write for fame. They wrote for truth, for healing, for remembering what had been forgotten. Right? The voice said, not the keepers, but something older, something deeper. She sat at the stone table. The quill she had carried appeared in her hand once again. She opened the book, and she began. She wrote of the girl who crossed a frozen meadow, who entered a snow globe filled with impossible stories and gentle librarians. She wrote of a door that only opened when the heart remembered who it truly was. She wrote of fear, of silence, of a childhood locked away. But most of all, she wrote of hope. The words flowed not from her mind, but from the deep well within her soul that had been thirsty for light. She wrote until the pages bled with silver. And when she was done, the book of becoming closed itself. The tree above her shivered, and then bloomed. All at once. The leaves turned, revealing stories she had not yet written, characters she had not yet met, worlds she had not yet dreamed. Nora stood, heart full to the brim. The book levitated beside her. You have become the story weaver. The tree whispered. Suddenly, the chamber began to dissolve, not in panic, but in peace. Like mist lifting. Nora felt the book pressed gently against her chest. It passed through her, into her. She gasped, not in pain, but recognition. She was the story now. She was the library. When she opened her eyes again, she was standing in the attic of her grandmother's house. The snow globe still rested on the table, glistening. Only now, it looked different. Inside, there was a tiny figure, a girl, standing beneath a glowing paper tree. And the title etched into the glass read, The Library in the Snow Globe, by Nora Everhart. The library was no longer silent. It breathed now, a gentle, warm pulse beneath the snow-crested dome. In the stillness of early dawn, Lumi stood at the spiral staircase's base, the last glowing book pressed to his chest. The storm outside had slowed, and the snow within the globe shimmered in slow motion. Like a spell caught mid-breath, air floated down beside him. Less mist now, more shape. A soft glow of memories returned to presence. Her eyes glistened with the light of untold pages. You're ready, she whispered. Lumi nodded. But I don't want it to end. All stories end, she replied gently. But endings are doors, and the library never truly closes. He ascended the staircase again. But this time it felt different, as though every step stitched the story tighter, looped it into place. The moment he reached the top floor, the observatory, he felt it. The pull of something ancient and grand. The ceiling had transformed. What was once a silver dome was now a mirror of the night sky. Thousands of stars blinked down, each one humming softly with words. Constellations danced, forming letters, sentences, titles, stories, maybe entire worlds. Lumi looked up and whispered, Am I part of this too? You always were, said a voice behind him. He turned. It was the old fox again, the same one that led him into the forest. Only now, the fox was wearing a cloak of shimmering paper, its edges fluttering like pages in wind. Its eyes were the same golden brown as his father's. I thought you left, Lumi said, stepping closer. I never leave, the fox said. Not really. I'm always in the margin. The silence between your thoughts, the first line of curiosity. The fox nodded toward the final book in Lumi's arms, the one with no title, no author. It pulsed softly with silver blue light, like the globe itself. You know what to do. Lumi walked to the podium at the room's center. It was shaped like a snow globe itself, glass, fragile, with etchings of mountains, forests, moons. As he opened the book, the library began to hum, a harmony of magic, of wind, of silence turning into sound. The pages were blank at first, but as he read, words appeared. This is a story of a boy who listened, who walked into snow and silence and found a world made of words. This is a story of you. Lumi kept reading. The book was writing itself in real time. His thoughts, his questions, his feelings etched in real ink. He did not come to escape the world, but to remember it. And in doing so, he gave the library its last story, the one that would open the door. The ground trembled, not violently, but like a great key turning in a locked dot above him. The stars in the dome burst into lines of script. The ceiling cracked, not destructively, but like a shell breaking open. Light streamed in, moonlight, starlight, dawnlight, all at once. And then, just ahead of him, a door appeared. The door shimmered like frost and oak and the memory of fire. It wasn't attached to anything. It simply stood in the center of the room, glowing faintly, waiting. Lumi looked at Aira. What's on the other side? Wherever your story needs to go next. Will I forget this place? Only if you stop believing in it. He turned to the fox. Will you come with me? I already am, it said, vanishing in a swirl of silver leaves. With a final glance back, Lumi stepped forward and opened the door. There was no sound, no flash, no cold, just a feeling like stepping into a deep breath or turning the final page of a book and discovering it was only the beginning dot. And then he was gone. Epilogue. The new librarian back in the forest. The Snowglobe sat quietly on the desk in the old cabin. Only now, something was different. Inside the globe. If one looked closely, the little library still stood, and in its windows, golden light glowed. If you squinted hard enough, you might even see a silhouette, a boy, now older, shelving books, opening doors, helping the wind remember stories long forgotten. And if one day you found yourself walking through snow and heard whispers, not of wind, but of words, follow them. You just might find the door again. And maybe, just maybe, Lumi will be there waiting, ready to help you write your own story. The end.